The little church on the edge of town stood quiet under the weight of a Kansas sunset, its steeple cutting a sharp silhouette against the sky bleeding red and gold. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood and melting wax, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes long after you left. Rows of pews stretched out, their varnish worn smooth by years of hands and backsides, and the stained glass windows threw jagged patches of color across the floor, reds, blues, greens dancing over the scuffed planks. Up front, near the altar, a couple of dented metal vases overflowed with wildflowers Maggie had picked herself from the fields that morning. Daisies, black-eyed Susans, a few scraggly sprigs of goldenrod that trembled every time the door creaked open. The organ sat in the corner, its pipes humming low as Mrs. Elsie Harper 80 if she was a day coaxed Ave Maria out of it, her gnarled fingers slipping on the keys now and then, making the notes waver like a heartbeat. Maggie Harper stood at the front, her hands clasped tight in front of her, the plain white dress she'd found at the thrift store hugging her frame just enough to feel real. It wasn't fancy, no lace, no train, just cotton that brushed her knees, but it was hers, and it was all she could manage on short notice. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose bun, a few strands sticking to her neck where sweat beaded despite the cool air. She was 37, but the lines around her eyes made her look older today, carved deep by years of grief and guilt she couldn't shake. Her fingers twisted the silver ring she'd worn for Tom, her late husband, until a few hours ago, when she slipped it off and tucked it into her pocket. Now her left hand felt naked, waiting. Roy Evans stood beside her, tall and lean in Tom's old gray suit, the one he'd worn to their wedding over a decade back. It didn't fit right, too tight across the shoulders, the cuffs riding up his wrists, but Roy didn't care. His hair was salt and pepper, combed back with a little too much pomade, and his face, weathered from 62 years under the sun, softened as he looked at Maggie. His hands shook just a bit as he held hers, the calluses rough against her skin, and his breath hitched every now and then from the lung trouble he'd fought off a while back. He wasn't the young man who'd once watched her from across a diner counter, but the way his eyes locked on hers said he'd never stopped seeing her that way. Up near the altar, Father Daniel stood in his black robe, his Bible open, his voice rumbling low as he read the vows. He was a wiry guy, bald as a cue ball, with a habit of tugging at his collar when he got nervous, and he was nervous now. His eyes flicked to the congregation every few lines, like he was waiting for someone to jump up and call the whole thing off. Do you, Roy Evans, take Maggie Harper to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, till death do you part? He asked, his tone steady but his brow creased. I do, Roy said, his voice rough but sure, loud enough to carry over the hum of the organ. He squeezed Maggie's hands, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles, and gave her a small, crooked smile that made her chest ache. Father Daniels turned to her, his Adam's apple bobbing. And do you, Maggie Harper, take Roy Evans to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, till death do you part? Maggie swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. The words stuck there for a second, tangled up in everything she'd been carrying: Thomas' memory, the kids, the whispers she could feel prickling the back of her neck. She glanced at Roy, saw the quiet hope in his eyes, and thought of Thomas' handwriting in that damn journal. Let Dad marry you if I'm gone, keep the kids safe. Her lips trembled, but she forced them into a smile. I do, she said, her voice cracking just a little. I do, Roy. The church wasn't packed, but it wasn't empty either. 3 kids sat in the front pew, dressed in their Sunday best, Lily with her braids and a daisy tucked behind her ear, Ben kicking his scuffed sneakers against the wood, Sam fidgeting with a toy truck Roy had carved him last Christmas. They were Tom's kids, her kids 10, 8, and 6, and their wide eyes followed every move like they were trying to figure out what it all meant. Lily clutched a bouquet of wildflowers she'd helped pick, her face a mix of pride and confusion. Ben muttered something under his breath, too low to catch, but Sam piped up, loud and clear. Mommy's marrying Grandpa. That is so cool. His giggle bounced off the walls, and a few folks chuckled nervous, awkward laughs that didn't quite cover the tension. Behind them, the pews held a scattering of neighbors and a couple of Roy's cousins, maybe 30 people total, their Sunday hats and denim jackets filling out the space. Mrs. Peterson, the town gossip with a perm that hadn't changed since the 80s, leaned over to her sister, her whisper sharp enough to cut through the organ. Marrying her father-in-law? Lord Almighty, what's this world coming to? Bet she's just after that farm Thomas barely cold in the ground. Her sister nodded, fanning herself with a hymnal. Poor Clara's rolling over right now, Roy snagging his son's wife? Shameless. Across the aisle, old George Tanner, Roy's fishing buddy, snorted loud enough to make heads turn. Roy's got some guts, I'll give him that. 62 and still chasing tail, didn't he think he had it in him? His wife elbowed him hard, hissing, "Hush, George. It ain't funny, this is a damn disgrace." A couple of younger guys from the feed store snickered in the back, one muttering, "What's Lily gonna call him now, Grandpa Daddy? This family essay soap opera." Maggie heard it all, the whispers, the jabs, the sneers, and her face burned, her hands tightening in Roy's grip until her knuckles went white. She wanted to turn around, yell at them to shut up, tell them they didn't know a damn thing about what she'd been through, what Tom had wanted, what this meant. But she didn't. She kept her eyes on Roy, on the way he stood there steady as a rock, like he didn't hear a word of it or didn't care. Father Daniels cleared his throat, his voice rising to drown out the chatter. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." He stepped back, tugging at his collar again, his eyes darting to the door like he half expected Thomas Ghost to barge in. Roy turned to Maggie, his hands sliding up to cup her face, gentle but firm. "I've waited a long time for this, Maggie," he said, soft enough that only she could hear. "Thomas okay with it? I know he is." His voice shook just a little, and she saw the tears pooling in his eyes, the ones he wouldn't let fall. She nodded, her own tears spilling over, and leaned in. Their lips met slow, tentative at first, then deeper. A kiss that tasted of salt and years and something she couldn't name. The organ swelled, Mrs. Elsie hitting a wrong note that screeched through the room, and the kids clapped, Lily loudest, Ben reluctant, Sam whooping like it was a party. The crowd clapped too, some half-hearted, some genuine, but the whispers didn't stop. "She's got nerve," Mrs. Peterson hissed, loud enough to carry. "Kissing him like that in God's house, Thomas watching, and he ain't happy. Bet Roy's been planning this since the funeral," George muttered, dodging another elbow from his wife. "Old dog's finally got his bone." Maggie pulled back, her cheeks wet, her breath shaky. She looked at Roy, then at the kids, who scrambled out of the pew to hug her legs. Lily pressed the bouquet into her hands, whispering, "You look pretty, Mommy," and Sam tugged at Roy's sleeve, grinning. "You're my daddy now, Grandpa?" Roy laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Something like that, kiddo." Ben hung back, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. "This is weird," he mumbled, kicking the floor, and Maggie's heart sank. She knelt, pulling him close despite his squirming. "I know, buddy," she said, her voice breaking, "but we're still a family, okay? Always." The doors banged open, and Ellen stormed in, Roy's sister, all sharp angles and fury, her coat flapping like a crow's wings. She missed the vows, but her timing was perfect for the chaos. "Stop this damn farce," she shouted, her voice bouncing off the rafters. "This ain't right, Roy. You're out of your mind, and Maggie, you're a gold-digging disgrace." She jabbed a finger at them, her cigarette-stained nails glinting in the light, and the room went dead silent, even Mrs. Elsie pausing mid-note. Father Daniels stepped forward, hands raised. "Ellen, this is a house of God, sit down or leave." "I ain't sitting for this," she snapped, glaring at Maggie. "Thomas kids don't need their grandpa playing husband, why all oughta be ashamed." She turned to the crowd, arms wide. "Who's with me? This is a sin." A few heads nodded, Mrs. Peterson loudest, muttering, "She's right. It's unnatural," but George stood up, his chair scraping loud. "Shut your trap, Ellen. Roy's happy. Maggie's good for the kids. Tom wanted this. I knew him and you didn't." Ellen's face went red, but before she could fire back, Roy stepped down from the altar, still holding Maggie's hand. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through like a blade. This is my family now, Tom's family. You don't like it, there's the door. The room held its breath, Ellen glaring daggers. Then she spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a candle toppled off the altar, wax splattering the floor. The organ kicked back in, shaky but loud, and Maggie let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She looked at Roy, at the kids clinging to them, and felt the weight of it all, the love, the guilt, the whispers still buzzing like flies. How did we get here through all this mess? Roy? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, drowned out by the music and the chatter picking back up. He squeezed her hand, his smile tired but real. One hell of a road, Maggie. But we made it. The crowd shuffled out, some offering stiff congratulations, nice ceremony. Weird as hell, though, George said with a grin, others just staring, their whispers trailing behind like smoke. Maggie clung to Roy, the kids at her side, and stepped into the dusk outside, the sunset painting them gold against the chaos they just walked through. Have you ever faced a crowd of critics about your choices? If so, drop a 1, if not, drop a 2 in the comments. Remember to subscribe to the channel and we will continue this surprising story. The wind whipped through the fields around Roy Evans' farm, rattling the windows of the old clapboard house and carrying the sharp bite of a Kansas winter. Inside, the kitchen was a pocket of warmth, the kind that came from a wood stove crackling in the corner and the hiss of a coffee pot on the counter. The air smelled of burnt logs and the bitter tang of the brew Roy always made too strong, the kind that stuck to your throat like tar. The linoleum floor was scuffed and peeling at the edges, and the table, a scarred oak thing Tom had built years back, wobbled under the weight of a chipped mug and a plate of biscuits Maggie had brought over, still warm from her oven. Maggie Harper stood by the sink, her coat still on, hands shoved deep in her pockets. She'd driven out here with the kids, Lily, Ben, and Sam, bundled in the back seat of her rattling pickup, their breath fogging the windows. It'd been months since Thomas' accident, the one that left her a widow and the farm a quieter, sadder place. She hadn't planned on coming back so soon, not with the way grief still sat heavy in her chest, but Roy's call had tugged at her. Just stop by, he said, his voice rough over the phone. Kids oughta see the place, and I ain't doing so hot. So here she was, the kids tumbling around the living room, their boots leaving muddy streaks on the rug, while she tried to figure out what to say to a man who lost more than she had. Roy sat at the table, hunched over his mug, his flannel shirt hanging loose on a frame that thinned out since she last saw him. His hair was grayer now, sticking up in tufts where he'd run his hands through it, and his eyes sharp blue like Tom's were rimmed red, maybe from the cold, maybe from something else. He coughed hard, a wet, rattling sound that made Maggie wince, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Damn lungs, he muttered, then looked up at her, his gaze catching hers in a way that felt too heavy, too long. Maggie, he said, his voice low, you're a sight for sore eyes. She forced a smile, unzipping her coat but keeping it on, like she wasn't sure she'd stay. Brought some biscuits, she said, nodding at the plate. Kids were asking about you. Figured it was time. He nodded, slow, like he was chewing on something more than words. Good of you. They're growing fast. Lily's got Tom's height already. He glanced toward the living room, where Sam's giggles mixed with Ben's grumbling over a toy truck. They're all I got left of him, you know. Maggie's throat tightened, and she busied herself pouring a cup of coffee she didn't want, just to keep her hands moving. Yeah, she said, her voice barely there. They miss him. We all do. Roy watched her, his fingers drumming the mug, then coughed again, harder this time, his whole body shaking with it. She set the pot down, stepping closer. You okay? That sounds bad. Been worse, he said, waving her off, but his breath came short, and he leaned back, closing his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they fixed on her again, sharp and clear despite the wheezing. Maggie, I gotta tell you something. Been sitting on it too long. She froze, the mug halfway to her lips, her stomach twisting. What's that? He took a deep breath, then let it out slow, like he was bracing himself. I loved you, he said, flat and simple, like he was stating the weather. Before Tom ever did. Saw you at that diner in town, pouring coffee, laughing with them truckers damn near dropped my fork when you smiled my way. I was gonna ask you out, Maggie, but then Tom came home one day, said he met this girl, and it was you. I stepped back, had to, for him. The room went still, the crackle of the stove the only sound. Maggie's mug slipped in her hands, coffee sloshing over the rim, burning her fingers. She set it down fast, wiping her hand on her jeans, her heart pounding so loud she thought he'd hear it. Roy, don't, she said, her voice sharp. You're not thinking straight, your lungs, the grief. I ain't crazy, he cut in, leaning forward, his eyes pinning her where she stood. I'm sick, sure, but I know what I'm saying. I loved you then, Maggie, and I kept my mouth shut 'cause Tom was my boy, and he needed you more. Watched you marry him, watched you build this family, and I swallowed it down every damn day. But he's gone now, and I can't pretend anymore. She stared at him, her breath shallow, her mind spinning back to those early days. Roy at the diner, always quiet, always tipping big. The way he'd linger at the counter sometimes, asking about her day. She thought he was just friendly, a good guy, Tom's dad. Not this. I didn't know, she said finally, her voice cracking. I never. Roy, why tell me now? 'Cause I'm tired of carrying it, he said, his hands spreading on the table like he was laying out a map. Tired of acting like it ain't there. You're here, Maggie, with the kids, and I look at you and it's still there, always has been. Thomas gone, but we ain't. And I ain't saying this to scare you off, I had to get it out. Maggie sank into the chair across from him, her legs giving out, her coat rustling loud in the quiet. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady herself, but all she could see was Tom, his grin, his laugh, the way he'd pull her close in the same damn kitchen. And now Roy, sitting there, tearing open a wound she didn't even know she had. I can't do this, she said, muffled through her fingers. I can't hear this, not now. I ain't asking you to do anything, Roy said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Just let it sit. You don't gotta say a word. The living room erupted with a crash, Sam's toy truck hitting the floor, followed by Ben's shout. Give it back, you little brat. Maggie jerked upright, grateful for the excuse, and stood fast. I need to check on them, she said, her voice tight, and bolted out of the kitchen before he could stop her. She found the kids tangled in a mess of toys and blankets, Lily trying to play peacemaker while Sam waved the truck like a trophy. Hey, knock it off, she snapped, sharper than she meant, and they froze wide-eyed. She took a breath, kneeling to pull Sam into her lap, his small arms wrapping around her neck. Sorry, buddy, she muttered, kissing his head. Mommy's just tired. Roy shuffled in behind her, leaning on the doorframe, his cough quieter now but still there. They're a handful, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips, like Tom was always stirring up trouble. Yeah, Maggie said, her voice hollow, her eyes on the kids instead of him. She couldn't look at him. Not after that, not with her head spinning and her heart pounding out questions she didn't want to answer. She stood, brushing off her jeans, Sam still clinging to her leg. We should head back soon. It's getting late. Stay a bit, Roy said, stepping closer, his hand brushing her arm before she could pull away. Kids can play, and I ain't said all that to chase you off, Maggie. I swear. She nodded, stiff, her skin tingling where he touched her. I know, she said, but she didn't not really. She moved to the couch, sinking into it, watching the kids wrestle over the truck while Roy hovered nearby, his presence heavy as the winter air outside. Later, after the kids were settled with hot cocoa she whipped up, Maggie slipped into their room to grab their coats. Her hand brushed a box under Lily's old cot, Tom's stuff, shoved there after the funeral. She pulled it out, dust puffing into the air, and found a leather journal, worn and soft from years of handling. She flipped it open, her breath catching at his handwriting. Dad loves her, saw it in an old letter he wrote. If I'm gone, Maggie, let him have a chance. You two keep the kids safe together. She dropped the journal like it burned, her hands shaking, her eyes darting to the door where Roy's shadow lingered. Oh, Tom, she whispered, tears blurring the ink. What the hell did you do? The kitchen at Roy's farm glowed soft under the flicker of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting shadows that danced across the cracked linoleum. It was late now, the wind outside howling through the fields, rattling the windows like it wanted in. The wood stove popped and hissed, pumping heat into the room, and the air was thick with the smell of butter and sugar. Maggie's hands deep in a bowl of dough, kneading it hard like it could knead out the tangle in her head. She stayed longer than she meant to. The kids sprawled out in the living room with blankets and mugs of cocoa gone cold, their chatter fading into sleepy mumbles. Roy had begged her not to drive back in the dark with the roads icing up, and she caved, too tired to argue, too shaken by that damn journal to face the empty house waiting for her in town. Roy sat at the table, his elbows propped on the wood, a mug of black coffee steaming in front of him. He pulled on an old sweater over his flannel, the kind with holes at the cuffs, and his hair was mussed from running his hands through it, a habit Maggie remembered from Tom, one that hit her like a punch every time she saw it. He watched her work, quiet at first, his eyes tracing the way her fingers pressed into the dough, rolling it out with a chipped wooden pin she found in a drawer. The radio sat on the counter, an ancient thing with a bent antenna, crackling through Sweet Caroline at low volume, the static weaving in and out like a ghost in the wires. "You don't have to cook," Roy said finally, his voice rough but warm, cutting through the hum of the song. "Kids are out cold, ain't nobody hungry." Maggie didn't look up, her hands moving faster, flattening the dough into a ragged circle. "Keeps me busy," she said, her tone clipped. "Can't sleep anyway, not after." She trailed off, her fingers pausing, the weight of his confession and Thomas' words pressing down like a storm cloud she couldn't outrun. Roy leaned back, the chair creaking under him, and took a slow sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving her. "After what I said," he finished for her, setting the mug down with a soft thud. "I didn't mean to rattle you, Maggie. Just couldn't keep it in no more." She grabbed a knife, slicing the dough into uneven strips. "Biscuits, maybe, or something close enough." "It's a lot, Roy," she said, her voice low, shaky. "You loving me back then, Tom, knowing it, I don't even know what to do with that." He nodded, slow, like he was turning it over in his head too. "Fair enough. Ain't a skin you to do anything, just wanted it out there, where it ain't festarin' no more." Maggie set the knife down, wiping her hands on a dish towel slung over her shoulder, and finally looked at him. His face was open, unguarded, the lines around his eyes deeper in the dim light, and something in her chest twisted sharp and warm and wrong all at once. "You should told me," she said, quieter now. "Back then, before Tom, before all this." "Couldn't," Roy said, his voice dropping too, almost lost in the radio's hum. "Tom was my boy, he saw you first and he was head over heels. What kind of man steals that from his own kid? I ain't that guy, Maggie." She turned away, grabbing a baking sheet, the metal clanging loud against the counter. "But you're telling me now," she said, her back to him, her hands trembling as she laid out the dough. "When it's too late, when he's gone, and I'm still his wife, Roy. In my head, I'm still his." "You ain't gotta be just that," Roy said, standing now, his boots scuffing the floor as he moved closer. "Thomas gone, Maggie, but you're here. Kids are here. I'm here. And I ain't saying this to push you, I'm saying it 'cause it's true." She spun around, her breath catching when she realized how close he was just a step away, his hands shoved in his pockets like he was holding himself back. "Don't," she said, her voice sharper than she meant, but it softened fast. "Don't make this harder than it already is." He didn't move, just stood there, his eyes locked on hers, steady and deep. "It's already hard," he said. "Been hard for years watching you with him, watching you raise them kids, knowing I'd never get a shot. But I see you now, Maggie, and I can't help it, I still feel it. Every damn day." The radio hit the chorus, Sweet Caroline. Good times never seemed so good, and Maggie's hands dropped to her sides, the towel slipping to the floor. She wanted to yell at him, to run out into the cold and drive away from this mess. But her feet wouldn't move, pinned by the weight of his words, by the way her own heart thudded in a rhythm she didn't want to name. "Roy," she said, her voice breaking, I can't feel this. Not for you." He stepped closer, slow, like he was afraid she'd bolt, and reached out, his hand hovering near her arm before settling there, light as a feather. You already do, he said, soft but sure. I see it in your eyes same way I feel it in mine. You're scared, Maggie, and I get it. Hell, I'm scared too. She shook her head, tears welling up, but she didn't pull away, not yet. It's wrong, she whispered. Tom, he's your son, my husband, I can't. Roy's hand slid up to her shoulder, warm through her sweater, and he tilted his head, his voice dropping lower. Tom loved you enough to want you happy even if it's with me. You read that journal, didn't you? He saw it coming, Maggie. He knew. The tears spilled over then, hot and fast, and she swiped at them with her sleeve, her breath hitching. I did, she said, her voice raw. I read it, and it's tearing me apart 'cause I don't know if I'm doing this for him or 'cause I feel it too. The radio crackled, the song fading into static, and Roy stepped back, giving her space but not breaking the thread between them. You don't gotta figure it out tonight, he said. Just don't run from it, Maggie. Not yet. She nodded, shaky, and turned back to the counter, shoving the baking sheet into the oven with more force than it needed. The heat blasted her face as she slammed the door shut, and she stood there, hands braced on the edge, trying to breathe through the mess in her chest. Roy didn't push, just sank back into his chair, sipping his coffee like nothing had happened. But the air was different now, thicker, charged, like a storm brewing inside these walls. The kids' laughter drifted in from the living room, Lily telling Sam a story, Ben grumbling about losing his truck again, and Maggie latched onto it, a lifeline pulling her out of the spiral. She grabbed a spatula, flipping it in her hand, and glanced at Roy. They're okay in there, she said, more to herself than him. That's what matters. Yeah, Roy said, his eyes softening, a small smile tugging at his lips. They're okay. And you're here, that's what matters to me. She didn't answer, just turned up the radio, letting Blue Moon fill the silence, its slow croon wrapping around them like a blanket. Roy stood after a minute, moving to the stove, and grabbed a potholder, brushing her arm as he checked the biscuits. Smells good, he said, his voice casual, but his touch lingered, and Maggie felt it warm, steady, pulling at something she buried deep. Roy, she said, turning to him, her hands stilling. I don't know what this is, what we're doing. He met her gaze, close enough now she could see the flecks of gray in his eyes, the way they crinkled at the corners. Me neither, he said. But I ain't running from it, are you? She didn't have an answer, not one she could say out loud, so she just stood there, the oven ticking behind her, the kids' voices fading, and let the question hang, heavy and unanswered, between them. Ever felt something you couldn't name? Drop your thoughts in the comments and stick around. Maggie and Roy are just heating up. The morning broke cold and gray over Roy's farm, the kind of day where the sky hung low, pressing the chill into the fields until the air bit at your skin. Inside, the kitchen was a mess of flour and grease, the biscuits Maggie had baked the night before scattered on a plate, half eaten by the kids before they tumbled back to the living room to wrestle over the last of their cocoa. The wood stove was down to embers, popping faintly, and the coffee pot sat cold on the counter, a ring of brown staining the glass. Maggie stood at the sink, scrubbing a skillet with more force than it needed, her sleeves rolled up, her hair falling loose from its bun. She hadn't slept, not really, just a few hours on the couch with Sam curled against her, his small snores the only thing keeping her from bolting out the door after Roy's words. Roy was out back, his boots crunching on the frost as he hauled firewood from the shed, his cough echoing sharp across the yard. The kids' voices drifted in, Lily bossing Ben around, Sam giggling over something dumb, and Maggie clung to the normalcy of it, trying to drown out the echo of Roy's confession, the way it lodged in her chest like a splinter she couldn't pull out. She read Thomas' journal again before dawn, sitting in the dark with the pages trembling in her hands, and every word, "Let Dad marry you if I'm gone," felt like a knife twisting deeper. She didn't know what she felt: guilt, love, fear, all of it tangled up so tight she couldn't breathe right. The front door banged open, slamming against the wall with a crack that made Maggie jump, the skillet slipping from her hands into the soapy water with a splash. Ellen stormed in, her coat flapping, her boots leaving clumps of mud on the rug. She was Roy's older sister by a couple years, all sharp edges and sharper tongue, her gray hair pulled back tight enough to stretch the lines on her face. Her eyes blue like Roy's but cold as the wind outside locked on Maggie, and her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a sneer but close enough. "Well, ain't this cozy?" Ellen said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. She dropped a grocery sack on the table, cans clanking inside, and crossed her arms, her cigarette-stained fingers tapping her elbow. "Heard you stayed the night, Maggie. What's the game here playing house with my brother now that Thomas outta the picture?" Maggie turned slow, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her heart thudding hard against her ribs. "Ellen," she said, keeping her voice even, "I brought the kids to see Roy. Roads were bad, didn't he want to risk driving back?" Ellen snorted, loud and sharp, her eyes narrowing. "Roads? Huh? That's a handy excuse. Funny how you're always sniffing around here lately, cooking, cleaning, acting like you still belong. Thomas gone, honey. You ain't family no more." The words hit like a slap, and Maggie's hands clenched the towel, her knuckles whitening. "I'm their mom," she said, nodding toward the living room where Lily's voice rose over Ben's grumbling. "That makes me family, always will." Ellen stepped closer, her boots scuffing the floor, her breath sour with coffee and stale smoke. "Don't gimme that. You're here for Roy, I see it. The way he looks at you, hanging on every word like some damn puppy. It's disgusting, Maggie. Yes, Thomas, Dad, you think my nephew be okay with you cozying up to his old man?" Maggie's face burned, her stomach twisting so hard she thought she'd be sick. She wanted to scream that it wasn't like that Roy's confession had blindsided her. But the truth stuck in her throat because it was like that, wasn't it? She felt it last night, that pull when he touched her, and she hated herself for it. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said instead, her voice low, trembling. "Roy's been good to us, helping with the kids, keeping this place going. That's all." "Bullshit," Ellen snapped, her finger jabbing the air an inch from Maggie's chest. "I ain't blind. He's sweet on you, always has been, even when Tom was alive. And now you're here, bikini biscuits, sleeping over like it's your damn right. What's next, huh? You gonna move in, play wife to your dead husband's daddy? That's some twisted crap, Maggie." The kids' chatter stopped, and Maggie glanced over, seeing Lily peek around the corner, her braids swinging, her eyes wide. "Go play, honey," Maggie said, her voice tight, and Lily ducked back, pulling Sam with her. She turned to Ellen, stepping closer, her own anger flaring hot now. "You watch your mouth," she said, her tone sharp. "Those kids don't need to hear this, none of it. Roy's their grandpa, and I'm their mom, and that's what matters." Ellen laughed, a harsh, barking sound that bounced off the walls. "Grandpa? Sure, till he's something else. I heard him last week at the feed store, talking to George about how you're holding up so well, damn near glowed saying it. He's got it bad, and you're letting him think he's got a shot. You're talking advantage, Maggie, plain and simple." The door creaked open behind her, and Roy stepped in, his arms full of firewood, his face flushed from the cold. He stopped dead when he saw Ellen, the logs shifting in his grip. "What the hell's going on?" he said, his voice rough, his eyes flicking between them. Ellen wheeled on him, her hands on her hips. "What's going on? You tell me, Roy. You're sitting here playing house with your son's widow sleeping under the same roof, acting like it's normal. You think Tom D want this? His wife and his dad shacked up?" Roy dropped the wood with a thud, dust puffing up from the floor, and straightened, his jaw tight. "You don't get to say what Tom D want," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "Maggie's here for the kids, for me too, 'cause we're family. You got no call coming in here throwing accusations." "Family?" Ellen spat, stepping toward him. "She ain't your family, she's Thomas. And you're making a fool of yourself, sniffing after her like some old dog. It's sick. Roy folks are talking, and I ain't gonna stand by while you drag our name through the mud." Maggie's hands shook, her nails digging into her palms, and she stepped between them, her voice rising. "Enough. Both of you just stop it. I'm not here to do whatever you think, Ellen. I love Tom, I still do, and I'm not trying to replace him with anybody. I'm here 'cause he has gone, and these kids need us, both of us." Ellen's eyes narrowed, her lip curling. Oh, you're good. Ain't you? Playin' the grieving widow card while you bat your eyes at him. I see through it, Maggie. You're after something the farm, the kids, Roy's money don't matter what, but you're working him and he is too damn soft to see it. Roy moved fast, faster than Maggie expected. His hands slamming down on the table so hard the biscuits jumped. Get out, he said, his voice a growl, his face red. You don't talk to her like that, not in my house. Not ever. Go on, Ellen, get. Ellen didn't flinch, just stared him down, her breath huffing out in angry bursts. You're making a mistake, Roy, she said, her voice cold now. And when it blows up, don't come crying to me. She grabbed her sack, turned on her heel, and stomped out, the door banging shut behind her like a gunshot. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the kids' voices and the wind rattling the panes. Maggie sank into a chair, her legs giving out, her hands covering her face. She's wrong, she said, her voice muffled, shaking. She's gotta be wrong. Roy stood there, his chest heaving, then moved to her, kneeling slow so his knees cracked. She's full of it, he said, his hand hovering near her shoulder before settling there, warm and steady. She don't know you don't know us. You're here 'cause you care, Maggie. I see that. She dropped her hands, looking at him, her eyes wet and wild. Do I? She said, her voice breaking. I don't even know anymore, Roy. She's right about one thing, I'm here too much, and it's confusing. What you said last night, what I'm feeling, it's all messed up, and I can't think straight. He didn't pull back, just kept his hand there, his eyes locked on hers. It's confusing for me too, he said. But I ain't sorry I said it. And I ain't sorry you're here. She stood fast, the chair scraping loud, and turned away, her breath ragged. I need air, she said, grabbing her coat off the hook, and bolted out the back door before he could stop her. The cold hit her like a wall, the wind tearing at her hair as she stumbled into the field, the frost crunching under her boots. She stopped by the old oak near the fence, her hands braced on its trunk, and let the tears come hot, angry, scared until her throat ached and her fingers went numb. She didn't hear Roy follow, didn't see him until his shadow fell across the grass, his breath puffing white in the air. Maggie, he said, soft, you don't gotta run from me. She didn't turn, just pressed her forehead to the bark, her voice barely there. I'm running from me, Roy, from all of this. He didn't answer, just stood there, close enough she could feel him, far enough she could breathe. And the wind kept howling, carrying her tears away into the gray. The wind had died down by midday, leaving the farm draped in a stillness that felt too heavy, too quiet after Elena's storm. Inside, the kitchen was tidied up, biscuit crumbs swept, dishes stacked by the sink, but the air still carried the weight of her words, sharp and lingering like the smell of burnt coffee. Maggie sat on the living room floor, cross-legged. The kids sprawled around her in a nest of blankets and toys. Lily was sketching in a notebook, her tongue poking out as she shaded a horse. Ben was sulking over a broken toy truck, his kicks scuffing the rug. Sam was humming Twinkle, Twinkle off key, stacking blocks into a wobbly tower. The wood stove ticked in the corner, pumping out heat, and the radio sat silent now, its static replaced by the soft creak of the house settling. Roy was out in the barn, his boots crunching across the yard when he left an hour ago, muttering something about checking the tractor. Maggie hadn't stopped him, needed the space, the quiet, after Elena's venom and the way her own heart kept tripping over itself every time Roy looked at her too long. She stayed inside with the kids, trying to anchor herself in their noise, their need, anything to keep her mind off the ache that wouldn't quit. But it wasn't working, not with Thomas' journal burning a hole in her thoughts, its leather cover peeking out from the box she dragged back to the couch. She tried to ignore it, busying herself with the kids fixing Lily's braid, prying the truck from Ben's grip before he smashed it more, wiping Sam's sticky fingers after he swiped a biscuit. But her eyes kept drifting to that box, to the journal she dropped last night like it bitten her. Thomas' handwriting slanted, messy, so damn familiar, kept flashing in her head. Those words she couldn't unsee. Let Dad marry you if I'm gone, keep the kids safe. It was crazy, impossible, and yet here she was, stuck in this house with Roy, with feelings she couldn't name, an LNS voice ringing in her ears like a bell she couldn't silence. "Mommy, look," Sam chirped, toppling his block tower with a gleeful smack, sending pieces skittering across the floor. "It's a big crash like Daddy's truck." Maggie's breath caught, her hands freezing mid-wipe on his fingers. "Yeah, buddy," she said, forcing a smile, her voice tight. "Big crash." She ruffled his hair, but her eyes darted to Ben, who'd gone stiff, his jaw clenching, the truck clutched tight in his fists. "You okay, Ben?" she asked, soft, reaching for him. He yanked away, his scowl deepening. "I'm fine," he muttered, kicking the rug again. "Sam's dumb daddy's truck wasn't he funny?" "It's not dumb," Lily said, not looking up from her sketch, her pencil scratching steady. "Yes, little he doesn't he get it." "Shut up, Lily," Ben snapped, his voice cracking, and hurled the truck across the room. It hit the wall with a thud, the wheel popping off, rolling under the couch. Maggie flinched, her chest tightening, and stood fast, grabbing his arm before he could bolt. "Hey," she said, firm but gentle, pulling him close despite his squirming. "That's enough, Ben. I know you're mad, talk to me." He glared up at her, his Thomas eyes shiny with tears he wouldn't let fall. "You're here all the time," he said, his voice low, accusing. "With Grandpa like you don't care Daddy's gone." The room spun, Maggie's knees buckling as she sank back to the floor, still holding him. "Care," she said, her voice breaking. "I care so much. Ben, I miss him every day. I'm here cause he wanted us to stick together. You, me, Lily, Sam, Grandpa too." Ben pulled free, wiping his nose with his sleeve, his scowl softening but not gone. "It's weird," he mumbled, and shuffled off to the corner, curling up with a blanket like a shield. Maggie watched him go, her throat burning, and Lily slid over, resting her head on her shoulder. "He's just sad," she whispered, her pencil still in hand. "I like it here with Grandpa, he tells good stories." "Yeah," Maggie said, kissing her forehead, her voice barely there. "He does." Sam crawled into her lap, humming again, and she held him tight, trying to steady herself. But Ben's words like "you don't care" cut deeper than LNS venom ever could. She glanced at the box again, the journal taunting her, and finally gave in. "Stay here, okay?" she said to the kids, setting Sam down. "I'll be right back." She grabbed the journal, her hands trembling, and slipped into the hall, shutting herself in Roy's spare room, a dusty space with a sagging bed and a dresser piled with old shirts. The air smelled of mothballs and thyme, and she sank onto the mattress, flipping the journal open to where she left off, her breath hitching as she read. "Found Dad's letter in the barn, old thing, yellowed, never sent. He wrote it to Maggie before we got hitched, saying he loved her, wanted her to be his. Damn near broke my heart, but I got it. He stepped back for me. I saw how he looked at her, still does sometimes, and it kills me a little, but he's my dad. If I'm gone in God, I hope I ain't she's the best thing for him. For the kids. Lily needs her smarts, Ben needs her tough, Sam needs her soft. Dad needs her too, he's been alone too long. Let him marry you, Maggie, if I'm not here. Keep 'em safe together. I trust you both." The words blurred, tears splashing onto the page, smudging the ink. Maggie pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob, her whole body shaking. Tom had known Roy loved her, known it torn him up, and still he wanted this? It was too much, too big, too wrong, too right, and she couldn't hold it all in her head. She flipped back, searching for more, and found a sketch tucked in the pages, Lily's work, from years ago, a crayon mess of 3 stick figures. Tom in the middle, Maggie and Roy on either side, all holding hands. A kid's doodle, innocent and dumb, but it hit her like a freight train, like Tom had seen this coming from the start. The door creaked, and Maggie jumped, slamming the journal shut, her heart pounding as Lily peeked in, her notebook clutched to her chest. "Mommy?" she said, her voice small. "You crying?" Maggie swiped at her face, forcing a smile. "Just missin' Daddy, sweetie. Come here." Lily patted over, climbing onto the bed, and Maggie pulled her close, burying her face in her daughter's hair. "You drew this?" she asked, holding up the sketch. Lily nodded, shy. Yeah, long time ago. Daddy liked it, said it was us all together. Maggie's breath hitched, her arms tightening around Lily. It is, she whispered, her voice cracking. All of us. The floorboards creaked again, and Roy stepped in, his coat dusted with frost, his face softening when he saw them. Everything okay? He asked, his eyes flicking to the journal in her lap, then back to her tear-streaked face. She nodded, shaky, clutching Lily like a lifeline. Yeah, she said, her voice raw. I read it, Tom's journal. He knew, Roy. About you, about us. He wanted us two to be together. For the kids. Roy's breath caught, his hand gripping the doorframe, his eyes widening. He wrote that, he said, his voice low, rough. Jesus, Maggie, he never said a word to me. He didn't have to, she said, her tears spilling again. He saw it, he saw you. And he gave us this, Roy. I don't know what to do with it. He stepped closer, slow, kneeling by the bed like he had last night, his hand resting on hers, warm and steady. We don't gotta do anything yet, he said, his thumb brushing her knuckles. But if he wanted it, if he saw us, I ain't gonna fight it no more. I love you, Maggie. Always have. She looked at him, her heart splitting wide open, pain and love and fear crashing together, and Lily nestled closer, her small hand patting Maggie's cheek. It's okay, Mommy, she said, soft. Grandpa's nice, we can stay. Maggie laughed, a broken, watery sound, and pulled them both in, Roy's arm wrapping around them too, his breath warm against her hair. Maybe, she whispered, her voice trembling. Maybe we can. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows, but inside, the room felt still, too still, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for her to decide. Ever had someone else's words turn your world upside down? Share it in the comments and stick around. Maggie's just hit a crossroads she can't unsee. The afternoon sun hung low over the farm, casting long shadows across the fields, the golden tips of the wheat swaying lazy in a breeze that carried the faint bite of coming frost. Inside Roy's house, the living room was a mess of scattered toys and half-drunk mugs of cocoa. The kids' voices a low hum as they played, Lily bossing Sam into building a block fort, Ben sulking with his broken truck in the corner. The wood stove ticked steady, pumping heat into the room, and the air smelled of burnt sugar from the biscuits Maggie had left cooling on the counter. She stood by the window, arms crossed tight, staring out at the dirt lane winding through the fields, her mind still spinning from Tom's journal, from Roy's touch, from the weight of it all pressing down like a storm she couldn't outrun. Roy was in the kitchen, the clink of a spoon against a mug cutting through the quiet as he stirred sugar into his coffee. He'd been gentle since she'd shown him the journal, giving her space but staying close, his presence a steady ache she couldn't shake. The kids had taken to him more these days, Lily asking for stories, Sam trailing him like a shadow, even Ben softening a little, letting Roy fix the truck's wheel with a screwdriver and a grunt. It was a fragile piece, one Maggie clung to, but it shattered when the rumble of an engine broke the stillness outside, tires crunching gravel as a beat-up sedan rolled up the lane. Maggie's stomach dropped, her hands tightening on her arms. Ellen, she muttered, spotting the familiar gray coat through the windshield, the sharp set of her shoulders as she climbed out, a man in a cheap suit trailing behind her. He carried a briefcase, his tie flapping in the wind, and Maggie knew trouble when she saw it. Roy stepped into the room, mug in hand, his brow furrowing as he followed her gaze. What's she doing here? He said, his voice low, rough with the edge of a cough he couldn't quite shake. Doesn't he look friendly? Maggie said, her throat dry, and moved to the door, opening it just as Ellen's boots hit the porch, the lawyer hovering behind her like a buzzard circling carrion. Ellen didn't knock, just pushed past Maggie, her coat brushing her arm, her eyes cold and hard as she scanned the room. Nice little setup you got here, she said, her voice dripping acid. Kids playing, coffee brewing, damn near picture perfect. Ain't it? Roy set his mug down hard on the table, the clank loud in the quiet, and stepped forward, his jaw tight. You got no call barging in like this, Ellen, he said, his tone sharp. What's this about? Ellen smirked, jerking her head toward the suit behind her. This here Mr. Hargrove lawyer from town. We're here to set some things straight. Roy, you and your girlfriend, she spat the word at Maggie, ain't fit to be running this place or raising them kids. Maggie's heart slammed against her ribs, her hands clenching into fists. They're my kids, she said, stepping up beside Roy, her voice shaking but firm. You don't get a say in that. Oh, I'm getting a say, Ellen said, pulling a stack of papers from Hargrove's briefcase and slapping them on the table. These are custody papers filed this morning. I'm talking Lily, Ben, and Sam outta here, 'cause you two are a damn mess. Roy's too old, too sick, and you, Maggie, you're playing house with your dead husband's daddy. Ain't no court gonna let that slide. The room tilted, Maggie's breath catching hard, her eyes darting to the kids, Lily looking up now, wide-eyed, Ben freezing mid-kick, Sam still humming, oblivious. You can't do that, she said, her voice rising, raw. I'm their mom. Tom left them to me, not you. Tom is dead. Ellen snapped, leaning in, her face inches from Maggie's. And you're screwing around with his dad. Don't tell me that's what he wanted. I'm family, blood family, and I ain't letting my brother's kids grow up in this twisted mess you're making. Roy moved fast, his hand slamming down on the papers, crumpling them under his palm. You're outta your damn mind, he growled, his face red, his cough breaking through the words. Maggie's their mom, always will be, and I'm their grandpa. You got no right, Ellen, no right at all. Hargrove cleared his throat, adjusting his tie, his voice smooth and oily. Actually, Mr. Evans, we've got a case. Your health records, lung issues, hospitalizations don't paint a stable picture. And Mrs. Harper's unconventional relationship with you raises questions about her fitness. Ellen's offering a clean home, no complications. Courts like that. Maggie's knees buckled, and she grabbed the back of a chair, her nails digging into the wood. Unconventional? She said, her voice trembling with fury. I love my kids, I'd die for them. You don't get to twist this into something dirty. Ellen laughed, a harsh, grating sound, and crossed her arms. Love? Honey, you're sleeping over here, making eyes at Roy. Folks are talking. Mrs. Peterson saw you two last week. Him holding your hand at the store like some lovesick fool. You're a disgrace, Maggie, and I'm saving them kids from it. Roy's cough erupted, hard and wet, doubling him over, and Maggie reached for him, her hand on his back as he braced himself on the table. Get out, he rasped, his voice ragged but fierce. You ain't talking, my grandkids are grandkids over my dead body. That's the plan, Ellen said, her smirk widening. You're half dead already, Roy. One take much. The words snapped something in Maggie, and she lunged forward, only Roy's arm catching her waist, stopping her from swinging. You bitch, she hissed, tears burning her eyes. You don't know us, you don't know Tom. He wanted this, he wrote it down, told me to be with Roy, to keep us together. Ellen's smirk faltered, her eyes narrowing. Wrote it? What kind of nonsense? The journal, Maggie said, wrenching free from Roy and storming to the couch, grabbing it from the box. She flipped it open, shoving it at Ellen, her hands shaking. Read it right here. Let Dad marry you if I'm gone, keep the kids safe. That's Tom's hand, his words. You want to fight that? Ellen snatched the journal, her fingers clawing the pages as she scanned them, her face twisting shock, then fury. This is bullshit, she said, tossing it back, the book hitting the floor with a thud. He was outta his mind, grief for something. No court's gonna buy this. They will, Roy said, straightening, his cough subsiding, his voice steel. This is writin', I'll swear to it. You're the one outta line. Ellen trying to rip this family apart 'cause you can't stand seeing us holding on. Hargrove shifted, his briefcase clicking shut. We'll let a judge decide, he said, smooth as ever. This'll get messy, folks better brace yourselves. Ellen glared, her jaw tight, then spun toward the door. You're gonna regret this, she said, her voice low, venomous. Both of you. She stormed out, Hargrove trailing, the sedan roaring to life outside as they peeled away. The kids were silent now, Lily clutching her notebook, Ben staring at the floor, Sam's humming stopped cold. Maggie sank to her knees, pulling them close, her arms trembling as she hugged them tight. Nobody's talking you, she said, her voice fierce through the tears. Not ever mommy S here. Okay? Roy knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his breath still ragged. We're in this together, he said, his voice low, steady. They ain't winning this, Maggie. She nodded, her face buried in Lily's hair. But the peace she felt an hour ago was gone, replaced by a gnawing fear until Ben's voice cut through, small and sharp from the corner. I don't want to go, he said, his eyes wet, his fists clenched. I hate her, I want to stay with you and Grandpa. Maggie's heart broke, and she reached for him, pulling him into the huddle, Roy's arms wrapping around them all. You're staying, she said, her voice cracking, right here with us. But outside, the wind picked up, howling through the fields, and Maggie knew this wasn't over not by a long shot. The afternoon stretched thin over Roy's farm, the sun dipping low and painting the fields in a dull gold that barely cut through the gathering chill. Inside, the house was a fragile bubble of warmth, the wood stove crackling soft in the corner, its heat battling the draft sneaking through the old windows. The living room smelled of cocoa and the faint dust of the rug, toys strewn across the floor like landmines, Lily's pencils, Sam's blocks, Ben's broken truck still missing its wheel. The kids were quieter now, their voices a low murmur as Lily read a picture book to Sam, her finger tracing the words, while Ben hunched over a comic, his scowl fixed like it been carved there. Maggie stood by the couch, her arms wrapped tight around herself, staring at the spot where Ellen's papers had hit the table, the echo of her threats still ringing in her ears. Roy paced the kitchen, his boots scuffing the linoleum, a mug of coffee forgotten on the counter as he muttered to himself, his cough breaking through now and then like a warning shot. He tried to calm her after Ellen left, his hand lingering on her shoulder, his voice steady, but Maggie could see the strain in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched every time he glanced at the kids. They held it together for Lily, Ben, and Sam, smiling, hugging, promising, but the air was thick with what they hadn't said. The fear neither could shake. The rumble of tires on gravel snapped Maggie's head up, her stomach twisting as she peered out the window. That same beat-up sedan rolled up the lane, slower this time, like it was savoring the trouble it brought. Ellen climbed out, her gray coat flapping in the wind, her face set hard as stone, and behind her came Hargrove, the lawyer, his briefcase swinging, his tie still flapping like a flag of bad news. But there was a third figure now, a deputy in a tan uniform, his badge glinting dull in the fading light, his hand resting casual on his belt near the radio. Maggie's breath caught, her hands clenching into fists. Roy, she called, her voice sharp, urgent. She's back and she brought the law. Roy was at her side in a heartbeat, his mug hitting the table with a clank, his eyes narrowing as he looked out. Son of a bitch, he muttered, his cough barking out as he moved to the door, yanking it open just as Ellen's boots hit the porch steps. Ellen didn't wait for an invite, barging in with Hargrove and the deputy trailing like shadows. Afternoon, Roy, she said, her voice cold, her smirk twitching. Maggie, hope why all enjoyed your little family moment 'cause it's over. Maggie stepped forward, planting herself between Ellen and the kids, her heart slamming against her ribs. What the hell is this? She said, her voice trembling but fierce, her eyes flicking to the deputy. You don't get to just waltz in here with a badge and take my kids. The deputy, Hank, his name tag red, shifted his weight, his hands still on his belt, his face blank but uncomfortable. Ma'am, he said, his drawl slow, we got a court order temporary custody pending a hearing. Ms. Ellen here filed a claim, says you and Mr. Evans ain't fit. Judge signed off an hour ago. Roy's hand slammed the wall, the thud echoing loud, his face red. Bullshit, he growled, his cough breaking through, rough and wet. Them kids belong here with Maggie, with me. You got no right, Ellen, no damn right. Ellen crossed her arms, her smirk widening as she nodded at Hargrove. Show him, she said, and the lawyer snapped open his briefcase, pulling out a crisp stack of papers, the ink still fresh, the judge's signature a black slash across the bottom. Emergency order, Hargrove said, his voice smooth, practiced. Based on Mr. Evans' medical history, multiple hospital stays, chronic lung condition, and concerns about Mrs. Harper's relationship with him. suggests an unstable environment for the minors Lily, Benjamin, and Samuel Evans. Ms. Ellen S. offering a stable alternative, and the court agreed to review it. Maggie's knees went weak, her hand grabbing the couch for balance, her breath coming fast and shallow. Unstable? She said, her voice rising, cracking. I'm their mom, I've raised them every damn day since Tom died. Roy S. their grandpa, he S. family. You can't twist that into something ugly and take him away. Ellen stepped closer, her eyes glinting cold. Cannon did, honey, she said, her voice low, venomous. You're sleeping over, playing house with Roy. Folks saw you two at the store, holding hands, acting like newlyweds. Mrs. Peterson S., ready to testify, says it's a disgrace. And Roy S. cuffing up a lung half the time. Judge, ain't gonna let kids stay with a sick old man and his son S. widow playing lover. Roy lunged, only Maggie's arm catching his chest, stopping him, his breath wheezing hard. You're a liar, he spat, his voice ragged. Maggie's here for the kids, for me too, 'cause we're holding this family together. Tom wanted it, he wrote it down. Damn it. Hank raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. Folks, I don't want to hear it, I'm just here to enforce the order. Kids go with Ms. Ellen till the hearing, 2 weeks, maybe 3. Why all can fight it then? No. Maggie's voice broke, her hands shaking as she turned to the kids. Who gone still? Lily's book slipping to the floor, Ben's comic crumpling in his fists, Sam's blocks abandoned. You're not talking my babies, I'll die first. Lily ran to her, burying her face in Maggie's side, her sobs muffled. Mommy, I don't want to go, she cried, her small hands clutching Maggie's sweater. Sam toddled over, his lip trembling, and Maggie scooped him up, holding him tight, her tears spilling hot. Ben stayed put, his eyes wide, his fists clenched, but his voice cut through, small and fierce. I hate you, he said, glaring at Ellen. I ain't going nowhere. Ellen's smirk faltered, but she waved a hand. They'll get over it, she said, nodding at Hank. Take let us go. Hank hesitated, his jaw tightening, but stepped forward, his boots heavy on the rug. He said to Maggie, softer now, don't make this harder and it's gotta be. Hand over, we'll sort it out later. Roy grabbed Hank's arm, his grip iron despite the cough rattling his chest. You touch them kids, and I'll break your damn arm, he said, his voice low, dangerous. They're staying right here. Hank pulled free, his hand hovering near his radio, his eyes narrowing. Don't make me call backup, Mr. Evans. This is legal, step back. Maggie's sob broke loose, loud and raw, as she clung to Lily and Sam, her body shaking. Please, she said, her voice cracking, pleading. They're all I've got, don't do this. Ellen, you can't, they need me. Ellen's face didn't budge, her arms still crossed. They need a real home, not this circus, she said, her voice flat. You made your bed, Maggie lying in it with Roy. Now deal with it. The standoff stretched tight, the kids' cries piercing the air, until Ben bolted not toward Maggie, but out the back door, his sneakers pounding the floor, the screen slamming behind him. Maggie's heart lurched, and she shoved Sam into Roy's arms, chasing after him, her boots slipping on the frost as she hit the yard. Ben, she yelled, her voice hoarse, scanning the fields. Ben, come back. She found him by the old oak, his small frame hunched against the trunk, his shoulders shaking with sobs. She dropped to her knees, pulling him into her arms, his fists pounding her chest before he collapsed against her. I don't want to go, he cried, his voice muffled, raw. I want Daddy, I want you and Grandpa, not her. Maggie rocked him, her tears soaking his hair, her breath ragged. You're not going anywhere, she said, fierce through the sobs. I swear, Ben, I'll fight her till I'm dead. You're mine. Roy stumbled out, Sam clinging to his neck, Lily trailing behind, her face streaked with tears. Hank followed, his radio crackling now, his voice clipped as he spoke into it. Need backup situation as a skeleton, he said, then turned to Maggie. Bring the boy back, we're doing this now. No, Roy said, stepping between them, Sam in his arms, his cough barking loud. You ain't talking him over my body. You hear me? Ellen smirked, unfazed. That S comin' soon enough, Roy, she said, and nodded at Hank. Get him. Maggie stood, Ben in her arms, Lily grabbing her hand, and faced them, her voice a broken roar. You'll have to kill me first, she said, her eyes blazing, her whole body trembling with the fight she'd never back down from. The wind howled, the field swaying wild, and the standoff held tense, brittle, ready to snap. Ever fought tooth and nail to keep your family together? Drop your battles in the comments and stick around LNS pushing Maggie and Roy to the edge. The dusk settled heavy over the farm, the sky bruising purple and orange as the last light bled out across the fields. Inside Roy's house, the air was thick with tension, the wood stove's faint crackle drowned by the echo of Elena's threats and the kids' quiet whimpers. Maggie stood in the kitchen, her hands braced on the counter, staring at the chipped sink where coffee rings stained the porcelain. Lily sat at the table, her pencil scratching slow across her notebook, sketching something Maggie couldn't see. Sam curled up on the couch, sucking his thumb. His toy truck clutched tight. Ben hovered near the window, his fists still clenched, his eyes darting outside like he was waiting for Ellen to storm back with more than a deputy next time. Roy paced the living room, his boots scuffing the rug, his cough breaking through every few steps, rough and wet but steady, like he was fighting to keep it together for them all. The standoff had ended in a standoff. Hank's backup never came, just a crackle on the radio saying they'd hold off till morning, giving Ellen a night to stew and Maggie a few hours to breathe. But breathing didn't come easy, not with her kids' faces scared, angry, lost burned into her head, not with Thomas' journal sitting heavy in her pocket, its pages crumpled from her grip. She sent Roy out to the barn to cool off after he nearly swung at Hank, his temper flaring hotter than she'd ever seen, and she gathered the kids close, promising over and over that no one was taking them. But the promise felt thin, fragile, and her hands shook as she poured water into a glass she didn't drink, just to keep them busy. Lily's voice broke the quiet, small but clear. Mommy, she said, not looking up from her sketch, are we gonna live with Aunt Ellen? She mean I don't like her. Maggie turned, her heart twisting, and crossed to the table, kneeling beside her daughter. No, baby, she said, brushing Lily's braid back, her voice firm despite the tremor. You're stayin' right here with me and Grandpa. I ain't lettin' her take you. Nobody's talking you. Ben snorted from the window, his back still to her, his voice sharp. She's gonna try, he said, kicking the wall soft. She hates us, hates you and Grandpa. What if she wins? She won, Maggie said, standing fast, her hands clenching. I'll fight her till I can't fight no more. Ben, you're my kid's mine and your daddy's and that's how it's stayin'. Sam popped his thumb out, his voice sleepy but scared. I want Grandpa, he mumbled, hugging the truck tighter. Yes, nice, he won, let her get me. Maggie's throat burned, and she moved to the couch, scooping Sam into her lap, his small body warm against hers. Grandpa's right here for you, she said, kissing his forehead. We're all here together. But Ben turned now, his Thomas' eyes cutting into her, wet and furious. Then why is Aunt Ellen saying all that stuff? He said, his voice cracking. About you and Grandpa being weird? I heard her. Mom, I ain't dumb. The room went still, Lily's pencil freezing midline, Sam's humming stopping cold. Maggie's breath caught, her arms tightening around Sam, her mind racing for words that wouldn't break them more. Ben, she said, slow, careful. Ellen's mad at me, at Grandpa, at everything. She's saying things to hurt us, but it don't mean they're true. I love you, all of you, and Grandpa does too. That's what matters. Ben's lip trembled, but he nodded, short and stiff, and turned back to the window, his shoulders slumping. Maggie watched him, her chest aching, and knew she couldn't keep running from this, not from Ellen, not from Roy, not from herself. She set Sam down, ruffling his hair, and stood, her hand slipping into her pocket to grip the journal. I'll be back, she said, her voice steady now. Stay here, help Lily with her drawing. Okay? She grabbed her coat, the wool rough against her skin, and stepped out into the dusk, the cold hitting her like a slap. The field stretched dark and quiet, the wind whispering through the wheat, and she walked fast, her boots crunching frost, heading for the little graveyard down the road where Tom rested under a slab of granite worn smooth by weather and time. The air smelled of earth and decay, the faint tang of cut grass lingering from some neighbor's last mow, and the oak trees loomed bare, their branches clawing at the sky. She stopped at Thomas' grave, the stone cold under her fingers as she traced his name, Thomas James Evans. Beloved husband and father, the dates blurred by tears she couldn't stop. She sank to her knees, the dirt hard and unforgiving, and pulled the journal from her pocket. Flipping it open to that page she'd read a dozen times now. "Tom," she said, her voice breaking, raw. "What the hell am I supposed to do? You wrote this, you wanted this, but it's killing me. I love him, Tom, I love Roy, and I hate myself for it. Is that what you meant? Is this okay?" The wind answered, rustling the leaves, and she sobbed, her hands pressing the journal to her chest. "I see you everywhere," she said, her voice shaking. "In the kids, in this place, in him, and I'm so damn scared, Tom. LNS trying to take M. Saying I'm wrong. Saying I'm betraying you. Am I? Tell me please, just tell me." She sat there, the cold seeping through her jeans, her tears soaking the pages, until her breath steadied, her sobs fading into hiccups. She flipped back through the journal, searching for something, anything to hold on to, and stopped at a folded paper tucked in the spine, one she'd missed before. Her hands trembled as she opened it, Tom's handwriting sprawling across the creases, dated a week before the accident. "Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Found Dad's letter again today, the one he never sent. He loves you, always has, and I'm okay with it. Took me a while, but I see it now. He stepped back for me, and I'm stepping back for him. Marry him if he asks, if you feel it too. Keep Lily drawing, Ben tough, Sam smiling. I love you, all of you, and I trust you to make it right." The paper slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the dirt, and Maggie pressed her hands to her face. Her sobs breaking loose again, relief, grief, love crashing together until she couldn't tell them apart. "You bastard," she whispered, laughing through the tears. "You knew, you always knew." Headlights cut through the dusk, the growl of Roy's old truck rumbling closer, and she wiped her face fast, shoving the journal and note back in her pocket as he pulled up, his door creaking as he climbed out. "Maggie?" he called, his voice rough, worried, his boots crunching as he crossed to her. "What were you doing out here? Kids said you took off, scared me half to death." She stood, her legs shaky, and turned to him, her eyes red but clear. "Had to talk to Tom," she said, her voice hoarse. Needed to know if this is right." Roy stopped, his hands in his pockets, his face softening in the dim light. "And?" he said, quiet, like he was afraid of the answer. She stepped closer, the note crinkling in her pocket, and pulled it out, holding it up with trembling fingers. "He wrote this week before he died. Said he knew you loved me. Roy said he's okay with it, with us. Told me to marry you if you asked, to keep the kids safe." Roy's breath hitched, his eyes widening as he took the paper, his hands shaking as he read, the words catching in his throat. "Jesus, Maggie," he said, his voice breaking. He meant this?" "Yeah," she said, tears spilling again, her hand finding his arm, gripping tight. "He did. And I love you, Roy. I've been fighting it, but I do. I'm scared, Ellen. The kids. All of it, but I can't run from this no more." He dropped the note, pulling her into his arms, his breath warm against her hair, his cough rumbling soft as he held her close. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough, raw. "Always have, always will. We'll fight her, Maggie, together. For Tom, for them kids, for us." She nodded, her face pressed to his chest, the cold fading under his warmth, and for the first time in months, she felt something solid, something she could hold on to. "Together," she whispered, her voice steady now, a promise carved into the dusk. The truck's engine ticked behind them, the fields whispering in the wind, and Maggie knew this was at the moment she stopped running. The morning sun crept slow over the farm, its light filtering through a haze of clouds that hung heavy, promising rain. Inside Roy's house, the kitchen was a war zone of flour and nerves. Maggie elbowed deep in a bowl of biscuit dough, her hands moving fast, mechanical, like she could knead out the knot in her gut. The air smelled of yeast and coffee, the wood stove pumping heat against the chill sneaking through the cracks. The kids were scattered around Lily at the table, coloring a horse with fierce focus, Sam on the rug, humming as he stacked blocks, Ben by the window, his comic forgotten, his eyes tracking every car that rumbled past, waiting for Elena's next move. Roy stood by the counter, sharpening a knife with a whetstone, the scrape of steel against rock a steady rhythm that matched the tick in his jaw. They decided late last night, after the graveyard, after Thomas' note had stripped away the last of Maggie's doubts. A wedding, real, legal, in the church down the road, not just for them, but for the kids, for Thomas' wish, for a shield against Elena's claws. Roy had called Father Daniels at dawn, his voice rough but sure, and the old priest had agreed, hesitant but willing, setting it for tomorrow if they could pull it off. Maggie had spent the hours since then on the phone rounding up neighbors, begging Mrs. Peterson for flowers despite her gossip, coaxing George into bringing his banjo. It was frantic, messy, but it was theirs, and she clung to it like a lifeline. Roy set the knife down, wiping his hands on his jeans, and crossed to her, his shadow falling soft across the counter. "You sure about this?" he said, his voice low, his hand hovering near her arm. "Once we do it, ain't no going back. Ellen'll come at us harder than ever." Maggie didn't look up, her hands pressing the dough flat, her breath steadying as she nodded. "I'm sure," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. "Tom wanted it, wrote it plain as day. And I want it too, Roy. For us, for them." She jerked her head toward the kids, her eyes flicking to Ben's tense back. He touched her arm then, light but warm, his calluses rough against her skin. "Okay," he said, his cough rumbling soft. "Then we're doing it tomorrow, church, whole damn town if they show. I'll fight her with you, Maggie, till the end." She managed a smile, small and shaky, and turned to him, flour dusting her cheek. "Good," she said, her voice catching. "'Cause I ain't losing this family, not to her, not to anybody." The kids perked up, Lily's pencil pausing, Sam's humming stopping, Ben's head turning slow. "Wedding?" Lily said, her eyes wide, bright, like a real one, with a dress and stuff? "Yeah, baby," Maggie said, wiping her hands on a towel, crossing to kneel by her. "Me and Grandpa tomorrow at the church. You'll be there, all of you, our family." Sam clapped, his truck bouncing in his lap. "Yay, Grandpa's gonna be daddy," he chirped, and Maggie's heart twisted, her smile faltering as Ben's scowl deepened. "Yes, not daddy," Ben snapped, his voice sharp, his comic hitting the floor. "Daddy's gone, this is dumb." He bolted for the door, his sneakers pounding, and Maggie lunged after him, catching his arm just as he hit the porch. "Ben, wait," she said, pulling him back, her voice breaking. "Talk to me, please." He yanked free, his eyes, Thomas' eyes blazing with tears he wouldn't let fall. "You're making it weird," he shouted, his fists clenched. "Grandpa's old, he's not daddy. Aunt Elena's right, it's messed up, and I hate it." Maggie knelt, her hands on his shoulders, holding tight as he squirmed. "I know it's weird," she said, her voice raw, steady. "I know it hurts. Ben, I miss daddy too. Every damn day. But he wanted this, he wrote it down, told me to keep us together with Grandpa. It's not replacing him, it's holding on to what he loved." Ben's lip trembled, his fight fading, and he sank against her, his sobs muffled in her sweater. "I don't want her to take us," he mumbled, his voice small. "I want to stay." "You're staying," Maggie said, fierce, hugging him tight. "Right here with me and Grandpa always." Roy stepped out, Sam in his arms, Lily trailing, her notebook clutched like a shield. "We're a team, Ben," he said, his voice rough but soft. "You, me, your mom, them, we're sticking it out." Ben nodded, wiping his nose, and Maggie stood, pulling them all close, the porch creaking under their weight. But the peace shattered when tires crunched gravel again. Louder this time, a sheriff's SUV rolling up with Ellen's sedan behind. Ellen stormed out, her coat flapping, Hargrove at her side, and Sheriff Tate climbed out slow, his hat tipped back, his face grim. Maggie's heart sank, her arms tightening around the kids as Roy stepped forward, his cough barking loud. "What now?" he said, his voice hard, his hand on the rail like he'd rip it off. Ellen smirked, waving a new paper, the ink still wet. Court moved up the hearing tomorrow, she said, her voice cold, triumphant. Sheriff S here to take the kids tonight. Judge says your little love nest ain't safe till it's settled. Tate shifted, his boots scuffing the dirt, his voice low. Sorry, folks, order S clear. Kids go with Ms. Ellen till the hearing S done. Why all can argue it out then? No. Maggie's voice broke, raw and loud, shoving the kids behind her as Lilia's sob cut through the air. You're not touching them over my dead body. Roy moved beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his cough rattling hard but his stance solid. You'll have to drag us all out, he said, his voice a growl. They ain't going nowhere. Tate raised a hand, his face tight. Don't make me cuff you, Roy, I don't want to do this. Step aside. Ellen laughed, sharp and cruel. Go on, Sheriff, get M. They're putting on a show. But it's over. Maggie's vision blurred, tears spilling hot as she clung to Lily and Sam, Ben pressing against her side. You can't, she said, her voice cracking, pleading. They're mine. Tom wanted this, he wrote it. Hargrove smirked, adjusting his tie. Journal S cute, Mrs. Harper, but it ain't legal. We've got witnesses, Mrs. Peterson. Half the damn town saying this is a circus. Judge LL see it our way. The kids cried louder, Lily's wails piercing, Sam's truck hitting the floor, and Ben shouted, I hate you. At Ellen, his voice breaking. Maggie's knees buckled, her body shaking as she sank to the porch, holding them tight, her sobs mixing with theirs. I can't lose you, she whispered, her voice raw. I can't. Roy knelt beside her, his hand on her back, his cough worse now, blood flecking his lips as he glared at Tate. You take M, and you're killing her, he said, his voice hoarse, desperate. You're killing me, don't do this. Tate hesitated, his hand dropping from his radio, his eyes flicking to the kids, then back to Ellen. This ain't right, he muttered, low. But Ellen snapped, do your job, Sheriff, or I'll call the judge myself. Maggie's head spun, her chest heaving, and she stood, shoving past Roy, her voice a broken scream. I can't lose you too, she yelled, her hands clawing the air, her eyes wild. Thomas gone, I can't lose them, I can't lose you. Roy, not now. The porch went silent, the kids' cries hushing, Ellen's smirk faltering, Tate's jaw tightening. Roy grabbed her, pulling her into his arms, his cough rattling as he held her tight, blood staining his sleeve. You ain't losing me, he said, his voice rough, breaking. Or them we're fighting this, Maggie. Together. Neighbors started trickling out, George from across the road, Mrs. Delaney with her walker, their voices rising, angry, protective. Leave M be, Ellen. George shouted, his banjo case banging his leg. They're good folks, better n you. Ellen's face twisted, her hands clenching, but Tate stepped back, his radio crackling as he muttered, Hold off, I ain't forcin' this tonight. He turned to Ellen, his voice hard. We'll wait till the hearing judge can sort it. I ain't tearing kids out of their home like this. Ellen's scream was sharp, furious, but she stormed back to the sedan, Hargrove scrambling after, the SUV peeling out behind them. Maggie sank to the porch, the kids piling into her lap, her sobs shaking them all as Roy knelt beside her, his arm around her, his breath ragged but steady. We've got tomorrow, he said, his voice low, fierce. Church, wedding, we're making this stick, Maggie. For Tom, for them. She nodded, her face buried in Lilia's hair, her hands clutching Ben and Sam, the fight still burning through her tears. Tomorrow, she whispered, her voice a vow, the dusk closing in around them like a promise they'd have to keep. Ever had everything on the line with nowhere to turn? Drop your do or die moments in the comments and stick around. Maggie and Roy are down to their last shot. The night pressed dark and heavy against the farm, the windows of Roy's house fogged with the heat of the wood stove and the breath of 5 souls packed tight inside. The kitchen was a mess of half-eaten biscuits and coffee cups, the air thick with flour dust and the faint tang of Roy's cough syrup on the counter. Maggie sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched, her eyes red and hollow from crying, her sweater streaked with Sam's tears and Ben's muddy fingerprints. The kids were finally asleep. Lily curled on the couch with her notebook, Sam sprawled beside her with his truck. Ben slumped in a chair, his comic crumpled under his arm. The quiet was a fragile thing, broken only by the stove's soft pops and Roy's uneven breathing as he stood by the sink, staring out at the fields like he could see Ellen's next move in the shadows. They'd barely spoken since the sheriff left. The weight of tomorrow, the wedding, the hearing hanging over them like a storm ready to break. Maggie's mind churned. Thomas knowed a lifeline she clung to, but Ellen's words circus, disgrace gnawed at her, clawing up every doubt she buried. Roy had stayed close, his hand brushing hers when he passed, his cough worse now, blood flecking his lips more than she liked. She caught him wiping it away with his sleeve, hiding it like he could hide the fear in his eyes, and it twisted her gut harder than anything Ellen had thrown at them. She stood, the chair scraping loud, and moved to the sink, her shoulder brushing his as she grabbed a rag to wipe the counter. Anything, to keep her hands busy. You should sit, she said, her voice low, rough from crying. That cough's getting bad, you're pushing too hard. Roy turned, his eyes catching hers, sharp and blue despite the weariness carving lines around them. Ain't sittin' while we're fightin' this, he said, his voice hoarse but firm. Tomorrow's it, Maggie, church, vows, then the hearing. I'm standin' with you, cough or no cough. She nodded, her throat tight, and kept wiping, the rag smearing crumbs across the counter. I know, she said, softer now. Just don't scare me, Roy. I can't lose you too, not after all this. He reached for her then, his hand closing over hers, stopping the rag mid-swipe, his touch warm and steady despite the tremble in his fingers. You ain't losing me, he said, his voice breaking just a little. I'm here, been here since the start, Maggie. Ain't going nowhere. Her breath hitched, tears welling up again, and she pulled her hand free, turning away to hide them. I'm scared, she said, her voice barely a whisper, her back to him. Ellen's got the law, the town half of em think we're crazy, the other half think we're sinners. What if we lose em, Roy? What if Thomas wrong, what if this ain't what he meant? Roy stepped closer, his boots scuffing soft, and his hands settled on her shoulders, turning her slow until she faced him. Tom wasn't wrong, he said, his eyes locking on hers, fierce and sure. You read that note he saw us, Maggie. He knew me better 'en I knew myself. But I got something to show you, been meanin' to, just never found the right time. She frowned, her heart thudding, and watched as he crossed to the pantry, pulling a tin box from the top shelf, its edges rusted and dented. He set it on the table, the clank loud in the quiet, and pried it open, fishing out a folded paper yellowed, creased, the ink faded but legible. Found this when I was cleaning out the barn after Tom died, he said, his voice rough, his hands trembling as he handed it to her. Wrote it years ago before you and him got hitched. Never sent it. Maggie took it, her fingers brushing his, and unfolded it slow, her breath catching at the sight of his handwriting blocky, uneven, so different from Tom's scrawl. The date was smudged, but the words hit her like a punch. Maggie, I saw you today at the diner, pouring coffee, Logan with the mold truckers, and I couldn't breathe right. You're something else, bright, tough, kind, and I love you for it. Been wantin' to ask you out, take you dancing maybe, but Tom came home yesterday, grin bigger 'en I ever seen, saying he met a girl you. He my boy, Maggie, and he head over heels, so I'm steppin' back. I ain't gonna mess with his happy not ever. But I'll carry this till I'm dust, 'cause you're the one I'd have picked if life was different. Roy. Her hands shook, the paper crinkling, tears splashing onto the faded ink as she read it again, her chest splitting wide open. Roy, she said, her voice breaking. You loved me that much? Even then? He nodded, slow, his eyes wet now, his cough rumbling soft as he stepped closer. Yeah, he said, his voice raw. Loved you then, love you now, always will. Step back for Tom 'cause he was my kid. But I never stopped seeing you, Maggie. Every smile, every laugh, it's been you. She dropped the letter, her hands flying to her face, sobs shaking her as she sank into a chair. Why didn't you tell me? She said, her voice muffled, cracking. All them years watching me with him, with the kids, why didn't you say? Didn't matter, Roy said, kneeling beside her, his hand on her knee, warm through her jeans. You were Thomas, you were happy. I'd rather die than take that from him. But he has gone now, and he gave us this, he saw it, Maggie. He stepped back for me like I did for him. She looked at him, her hands dropping, her eyes searching his blue, steady, aching, and saw it all. The years of quiet, the love he buried, the fight he held back until now. I love you, she said, her voice trembling. Sure, I fought it, God, I fought it, but I do, Roy. And I'm so damn scared we're gonna lose everything tomorrow. He pulled her into his arms, his cough rattling as he held her tight, his breath warm against her hair. We ain't losin', he said, his voice fierce despite the strain. Church tomorrow, vows, rings, all of it. Then the hearing, we got Thomas note, this letter, us. Ellen can't touch that. The door banged open, and Maggie flinched, pulling free as Ellen stormed in. Her coat dripping rain, her eyes blazing. Hargrove trailed her, his briefcase slick with wet, and Sheriff Tate loomed behind, his hat off, his face grim. Changed my mind, Ellen said, her voice cold, cutting. Talking em tonight, hearing s at noon, and I ain't riskin' you two pullin' some stunt. Maggie stood fast, her chair tipping back, her voice a raw scream. No, she bolted to the kids, waking them with a shake, pulling them close as Lily's cry pierced the air. Sam's wails joining in, Ben's fists swinging wild. You're not talking em, I'll kill you first. Roy lunged, his cough erupting bloody as he grabbed Ellen's arm, his voice a growl. Over my dead body, he said, swaying, his face pale, blood staining his chin. Tate stepped in, his hands up, his voice sharp. Enough! Roy, back off, Maggie. Let him go. This is legal, don't make me arrest you. Ellen smirked, wrenching free, and shoved the letter at Hargrove. Look at this, she said, snatching it from the table. Roy's been pinnin' for her since before Tom, pathetic. Proves they're nuts, Judge LL, eat this up. Hargrove scanned it, his smirk widening, but Tate grabbed it, his eyes flicking over the words, his jaw tightening. This is real, he said, looking at Roy, then Maggie, his voice low. Yeah, Maggie said, her voice breaking, clutching the kids. Tom knew he wanted it. That's his note, Roy's letter, it's us, Sheriff. Ellen's the one tearing us apart. Tate hesitated, the paper crinkling in his hand, his eyes darting to the kids' sobs. Roy's bloody cough, Ellen's smirk. This changes things, he muttered, then turned to Ellen, his voice hard. I ain't doing this tonight, not with this. Hearing s tomorrow, let em have their damn wedding. Judge can sort it. Ellen's scream was shrill, furious. You're soft, Tate. They're playing you, take em now. No, Tate said, stepping back, his hand on his radio. We're done out. He shoved the letter back at Maggie, nodding stiff. Good luck tomorrow, you'll need it. Ellen glared, her fists clenched, but stormed out, Hargrove scrambling after, the SUV's lights cutting through the rain as they peeled away. Maggie sank to the floor, the kids piling into her arms, her sobs shaking them all as Roy knelt beside her, his hand on her back, his cough wet but steady. We've got it, he said, his voice hoarse, fierce. Tomorrow church, then the fight. We're winning this, Maggie. She nodded, her face buried in Lily's hair, the letter clutched tight, Thomas' words and Roy's love a shield against the dark. Together, she whispered, her voice a vow, the rain drumming hard outside as they braced for the dawn. The morning sun broke soft over the Kansas plains, its light spilling warm across the fields, chasing off the last of the rain that pounded the farm all night. Inside Roy's house, the kitchen was a quiet chaos, biscuit crumbs on the table, coffee mugs stacked in the sink, a faint whiff of flour and wood smoke lingering in the air. The kids were sprawled in the living room, still in their church clothes from yesterday, Lily's dress wrinkled, Sam's tie undone, Ben's shirt untucked, sleeping hard on the couch after a day that stretched them all to breaking. Maggie stood by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee, her white dress swapped for jeans and a sweater. The silver ring Roy had slipped on her finger glinting dull in the dawn. Roy sat at the table, his vest unbuttoned, his hair mussed, a bandage on his arm from the doctor's visit after the hearing. His cough quieter now but still there, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing it all. The wedding had gone off in a blur, Father Daniel's voice trembling through the vows. The church half full of neighbors who'd shown up despite the whispers. Their faces a mix of support and shock. George's banjo had twanged "You Are My Sunshine," shaky but sweet, and Mrs. Peterson's wildflowers had drooped in the vases, petals scattering when Ellen barged in, screaming about sin until Tate dragged her out. Maggie had clung to Roya's hand, her voice steady as she said "I do." The kids at her side, Lily beaming, Sam giggling, Ben stiff but there while the town's chatter buzzed like flies she couldn't swat away. Roy's kiss had been fierce, bloody from his cough but real, and the kids had piled into their arms, a messy, tear-soaked huddle that shut out the world. The hearing came fast after, a cramped courtroom in town, the judge's bench looming over them like a guillotine. Ellen had strutted in, Hargrove at her side, her smirk sharp as she laid out her case: Roya's health, Maggie's immorality, the circus of their wedding. Mrs. Peterson testified, her voice shrill about disgrace, and half the feed store boys nodded along, muttering about old Roy snagging his son's girl. But Maggie had stood tall, Thomas' note and Roy's letter in her hands, her voice breaking as she read them aloud. Thomas' wish, Roy's sacrifice, their love forged through years of quiet and grief. Roy backed her, his cough rattling but his words steady, swearing to fight for the kids till his last breath. George and Mrs. Delaney took the stand, their voices rough with loyalty. George calling Ellen a spiteful hag, Mrs. Delaney praising Maggie's heart and the kids' tears. Lily's soft "We want mommy and grandpa" tipped the scales. The judge, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes, had banged her gavel, her ruling sharp. Custody stayed with Maggie and Roy, Ellen's claim tossed out, the wedding papers signed and sealed. Maggie turned from the window now, her eyes settling on Roy, his face softer in the morning light, the lines smoothed by a wind they'd clawed for. "We did it," she said, her voice low, still shaky from the weight of it all. "They're ours, really ours." Roy nodded, standing slow, his chair creaking as he crossed to her, his hand finding hers, warm and steady. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough but warm, his thumb brushing her ring. "Thomas smilin' somewhere, I feel it. We kept em safe, Maggie, like he wanted." She leaned into him, her head on his chest, his heartbeat thudding soft under her ear, his cough a faint rumble she'd learned to live with. "I was so scared," she said, her voice breaking just a little. "Ellen, the town, losing you, I couldn't breathe through it." "You didn't lose me," he said, his arm tightening around her, his lips brushing her hair. "Ain't going nowhere, promised you that, didn't I?" She nodded, tears welling up but not falling, and pulled back, looking at the kids, her kids. Their kids sleeping peaceful for the first time in weeks. "They're okay," she said, more to herself than him. "Ben's not fightin', Lily's drawin' again. Sam's smilin', we got through." Roy followed her gaze, his eyes softening, a small smile tugging at his lips. "They're tough like you," he said, his voice warm. "Like Tom, too. We're a family, Maggie, messy, loud, but ours." The screen door creaked, and George poked his head in, his banjo case banging the frame, his grin wide under his battered hat. "Why, all alive in here," he said, stepping inside, Mrs. Delaney shuffling behind him, her walker thumping the floor. "Heard the judge gave Ellen the boot, whole town's buzzin'." Maggie managed a laugh, shaky but real, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "Yeah," she said, stepping out of Roy's arms but keeping his hand. "We're still standin' barely." Mrs. Delaney nodded, her eyes sharp despite her age. "Good," she said, her voice firm. "You two fought hard, Tom. Be proud. Kids need you, and this place does too." George set his banjo down, clapping Roy on the shoulder. "Hell of a wedding," he said, grinning. "Banjo's still sore from it. Reckon we oughta do it again. Just for fun." Roy chuckled, his cough rumbling soft, and squeezed Maggie's hand. "One's enough," he said, his eyes on her. "Got what we needed, rest is gravy." Maggie nodded, her throat tight, and looked out the window again, the fields stretching wide and quiet under the new day. "We're keeping it going," she said, her voice steady now. "This place, Tom's place, ours. Open it up, let folks come by, share stories, maybe dance a little. Keep him alive that way." Roy's smile widened, his hand warm in hers. Sounds right, he said, his voice rough but sure. Kids LL like it. Lily can draw, Ben can sulk, Sam can sing off key. She laughed, the sound breaking free, and the kids stirred, Lily blinking awake, Sam yawning, Ben grumbling as he sat up. Mommy? Lily said, rubbing her eyes. We still married to Grandpa? Yeah. Baby, Maggie said, crossing to her, pulling her into a hug. We're all married now, family, stuck together. Sam toddled over, his truck banging her leg, and grinned. Grandpa Daddy. He chirped, and Roy scooped him up, his cough quieting as he ruffled his hair. Close enough, kiddo, he said, his voice warm, and Ben shuffled closer, his scowl gone, his hand brushing Maggie's arm. It's okay now? He said, soft, unsure, and Maggie pulled him in, her arms full of them all. Yeah, Ben, she said, her voice fierce, sure. It's okay, better and okay. George strummed a soft chord on his banjo, Mrs. Delaney tapping her walker to the beat, and the room filled with a quiet hum, laughter, chatter, the clink of mugs as neighbors trickled in, drawn by the news, the fight, the family that wouldn't tea break. Maggie leaned into Roy, his arm around her, the kids at their feet, and felt it. Thomas grinned somewhere in the wind, the past and present woven tight, a love that outlasted the storm. Think he's dancing up there? She said, her voice low, her eyes on the fields. Roy nodded, his lips brushing her temple, his voice a whisper. Yeah, with us, Maggie. Always. The sun climbed higher, the farm waking slow, and they stood there together, whole, a family forged in fire and held by something stronger than blood. Dear friend, our story has come to an end. Which character of the story do you like the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Wish you good health.